Ready? Okay, so here we are. We're in the West Hartford Center, the town of West Hartford, right? And we want to talk about Roland Barthes, and we want to talk about myth. And Barthes says that myth is a type of communication. It's a way of speaking, right? Kind of quote unquote. Speaking as in, you could do it orally, you could do it through pictures, you could do it through architecture. And so what we have in front of us is a store. It's a yoga store. It's called Lululemon. And now, if we were taking a foreign language class, and I just gave you a picture of a store with maybe clothing in it, right? And I said, what's this? You would say it's a clothing store. And what happens in the store?
You get clothing.
Yeah, people buy clothes or sell clothes. Or, unfortunately, maybe you have to work in that store. Okay? So if we're looking at a first order signification, the store, right, what's its meaning? To buy, to sell, to work. Yeah, that's it. But there's a second level here. There's a second order signification going on, and it's happening through the architecture, right? Now, when I look at this architecture, the facade, and I'm going to ask you, right, what time period, what country, what are we talking about here? It's obviously not indigenous, right, to this area. What does it strike you as coming from?
German, maybe.
German?
European, Dutch.
European, Dutch. What time period? Time period, anyone? What's that? 1700s. So we have somewhere, it's either kind of like, somebody said yesterday medieval, right? Early modern period. It's kind of got that Tudor look / Swiss chalet.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
So the architecture itself does not belong here, right? It's not something organic that sprung up, yeah, from this culture, yeah, in the town of West Hartford. It's been placed here for some other reason. We don't know what, right? So we have the myth. We have its meaning, right? We can talk about meaning. Is it European? Is it German? Is it Swiss? Well, that's really not important. What's important is we want to kind of do a mood description thing here. We want to reduce those words to their essence. What do we mean when we say European? What do we mean when we say medieval? Now, Barthes says that we have to actually create a new language. We have to create a neologism. So when I look at this, I would say historicity. What would you say?
Did you just say historicity?
Historicity.
Okay.
Any ideas?
Unmade up words.
Well, it's not really a made-up word. It's an actual real word. But I mean, if I'm going to say European, what does European mean to you? What does this particular architecture say to you?
This looks kind of vintage.
Vintage. So vintage in what way? What do you mean? Be a little more specific.
Like, kind of old, but sentimental.
So old, sentimental. Does it give this place a feeling of permanence or of timelessness? Right? That it's actually kind of rooted here. It's been here for like a long time, but it really hasn't. Okay, you notice the brickwork too, right? It looks very kind of artisanal, like somebody in their backyard, right, or some kind of rustic, firing kiln made this brick. So this is stop number 1, right, of our myth tour of West Hartford.
Stop there. It would be making multiple
Remember, what
videos.
I haven't talked about so far, I talked about myth, right? It's a type of speech. It's a second order signification system. But what I haven't talked about, and what I'm probably not going to talk about, is the motivation of this myth. Because if I talk about the motivation of this myth, I'll totally destroy your paper. Well, I'll actually answer your paper for you. You'd be like, oh, well, Professor Harding said the motivation for this myth is X. Therefore, the motivation for the myth on Blue Box Square must be the same thing.
You're going to walk into the sign.
And I don't want to do that to you. Here's our second. If you stop right here, okay, and you look at basically the facades of this, the storefronts, right? It's fairly like 1940s, 1950s, 1960s. We have kind of CVS Pharmacy, Art Deco, concrete fronts. Over here, they put the columns in. It's brickwork, and then you can see the brick in the back. They just put a stucco on top of it. It looks very kind of organic, right? Like this belongs here. However, this building over here, this large brick building, 3 stories, where does this building come from? What?
London,
What?
London, maybe?
Maybe London? Why would you say that?
This looks old and kind of foreign.
It looks kind of foreign.
Ironwork.
Well, we have the ironwork, the mock balconies. Actually, we probably see something like this in Paris. It's got the mansard roof. It's got up there in the top and the little turrets up there. That's obviously where all the starving artists live. Yes, and there's the mock balconies where the prince comes out and addresses the crowd. I mean, think about it. This is typical Parisian architecture. But here it is in the village or the town of West Hartford. So again, we have this mythic, right, quality going on. This architecture is speaking to us. It is saying something about this town, about this street. What exactly is it saying? What is its motivation? What is it trying to communicate? I will not tell you. But I am pointing out, as we go along, the various myths that the architecture is saying to us. This, straight ahead, I'm not getting anything. It doesn't, myth has to borrow from a history. This is indigenous, right? This belongs to this area. It's grown up organically, you know, through the ages, from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Big deal. This, of course, has not. It's been borrowed from somewhere else. Our mock Tudor Swiss chalet has been borrowed from somewhere else, from some other time period. It's taking a history, right, an ethnic or organic history, and it's turning it into a type of speech. It's saying something quite naturally, but in order to say the thing that it's saying, it has to borrow someone or something else's history to do it. Do you understand that? So this is myth in action. Let's walk down here. Let's just look at this storefront. It's perplexing.
It's perplexing. Okay.
Now, Zeal, what do you think? Where would we find this kind of architecture? What is it reminiscent of? This facade.
I don't know.
No?
Italy?
Why Italy now?
It looks kind of Italy-ish.
Italy-ish.
It has a certain kind of Italianness, right? If we wanted to kind of create our neologism there, right? But it's also very kind of there's an Arabic feel to it as well, right? The arches aren't quite Roman arches, but it's almost like we have the colonnade. You know, if these windows weren't here, it would be a hallway that you would pass through, an exterior hallway. It also reminded me a little bit of, dare I say it, Zeal, India.
India.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. In other words, this is kind of an amalgamation, right? It's a conglomeration of different styles. We have that kind of exterior Italianate courtyard, the arches and the walkways. It's also got the kind of Arabic feel to it.
Oh yeah, like it's something the palaces have. And
Yes.
Forts and all.
Yes. And once again, it's, you know, here we are. It's like one of these things does not belong here. One of these things is not quite the same, and this is it. This is from a different time period. It's from a different history. It's from a different, you know, ethnic, you know, background than your kind of, well, it's kind of average, kind of ho-hum, provincial, West Hartford architecture. Let's move. And I'm going to stay away from this building. I have no idea what it is or what it's saying. It's a little kind of postmodern Frank Lloyd Wright going on. Other than that, I'm not sure. It really is. You can actually tell that it started out as your typical kind of brick-fronted building, and then somebody put in this, I don't know, Frank Lloyd Wright meets Bauhaus. Time period. What kind of culture are we looking at? Where would we see this type of a building?
England?
Possibly. I mean, the Corinthian style columns, right? Very stately, very ornate. The balcony again. Not really sure, but it's strange. It's a mix of things, right? It's not just like one thing. But when you turn around and you look at our CVS pharmacy and you look at the rest of Farmington Avenue, it doesn't quite fit. It's doing something different. It has a different message. Moving on. Here again, right? Across the street where Chipotle is. Your typical West Hartford storefront. Same thing over here with Kimberly Boutique. Typical West Hartford storefront. This, not so. I'm back in Paris. And over here, I don't know. I'm in Paris. I'm maybe in Greece. I'm in England. I'm not quite sure, but it is has a European feel to it. The last piece that we'll look at on Farmington Avenue, right up here. So we'll stop here. We'll try not to get hit by a car. This storefront, once again, it's a store. It's selling goods. Okay, you can go in there. You can buy things. So first order signification, storefront, the signifier, store, the signified, buying, selling. Unfortunate people working, right? But the storefront itself is kind of being used or hijacked, if you will, right, by a second order, a second level of signification. Here we have the myth. Again, a history is being presented to us. Not at all organically, right? It's being taken out of a context from somewhere else, and it's being put on this wall, and we're led to see this as what? Where would we see this kind of architecture? It's not what?
It's not Indian.
It's not Indian. And what makes you say Spanish?
I don't know why.
And I mean, that's exactly... Well, you know, and Eric, I mean, great point. I mean, Barth tells us that the problem with myth is that although it does speak to us, it hails us. When we try to figure out exactly what it is saying, the concepts are kind of amorphous, right? Not easy to pin down. And you find that you actually have to create a new word. You're like, well, it's kind of Spanish, but not really, right? And it's kind of Key West, but not really. And so you actually have to make up a word that kind of sums up, as Barth does when he says he comes across the Basque-style chalet on the Rue Gambetta or the Rue Jean-Gere. He goes, I look at this house, and he goes, I just have to say, yes, my favorite word, I have to say, this house it represents a certain Basquity, yes. And so, again, here we are. It's like you would have to come up with the words to describe what it is this architecture is saying to you. And it would be difficult, but not impossible, right? Once again, we've walked down Farmington Avenue. We've talked about the different myth that's resident here in the architecture. But what we haven't talked about is why. You know, why is it here? Obviously, the myth is for someone. It's being presented to an audience. And there is also some group or something or someone who's benefiting from the myth. So the motivation of the myth still hasn't been explained. I'm not going to. Yes, I know, I truly do want to, but I can't. Because if I do, I may say too much. I may have said too much already. Okay. This ends our actual part of the Farmington Avenue walk. We're now going to go down to Blueback Square so we can actually end our video. And this is the end of our kind of Barthian reading of Farmington Avenue for myth within architecture.